right, so let me do a quick introduction to Joanne. Joanne has been participating with us in ISBM and is our leader in pricing and understanding the way to bring more profitability to your company through pricing actions. She's very pragmatic. She's definitely able to build confidence and let you understand how your actions can drive your business in a way that is meaningful and not punitive, and certainly fulfilling your value that you bring to the marketplace. Prior to being running Price to Profits, which she founded in 2013, she was at DuPont and transformed a lot of DuPont's pricing practices. And in that very complicated product lines of the DuPont world, she was outstanding in being able to bring those profits. She's also got some books out there: the Price Negotiation Playbook, the Pricing and Profit Playbook, and Pricing in a Crisis. If you don't have those on your shelves, you should. So I'm going to stop sharing now, Joanne, and I'm going to let you put yours up.
All right.
There we go. I did it. Okay, now it's your turn.
Getting me. Let's see. All right. I think that I'm up and sharing.
There you go.
All right. So here's my introduction. Lynn has already done that about me. So let me move right on.
Yeah, it's okay. You could repeat it. That's all right.
No, you covered it. I'm just a little more pictorial than you. Okay. So if we think about the potential policies that are coming with the new administration, there is a myriad of those that might affect your pricing or what you should be doing with your pricing strategy. Maybe because you have a different change in your cost situation. Maybe because you have a different change in your market demand, your volume, that might affect, anything that affects volume likely has a corresponding appropriate price move. So we have a number of things that are happening. Some of these policies people feel might be inflationary, while some might be de-inflationary, right? So how are they going to net out? Are we going to have lower inflation? Might we have a small increase and then a lower inflation? Are you going to get hit with tariffs? Those are probably the big kinds of issues. And not only do we have these policies, some of which are going to potentially impact very quickly, right? Where you need to pivot in a very quick way. Others might be a little slower, perhaps the whole drill, baby, drill. And when that flows over into maybe lower energy cost, might have a little bit longer term before they impact. The key is to be ready for this world of uncertainty. And besides kind of the uncertainty that I've just shown in these policies and the implications of them, many of these policies affect other parts of the world: our foreign policy, our tariffs, our oil, gas policies. And so there can be counter moves by other countries just to complicate that situation. So as we go into this, I can tell you, you could talk to 10 different economists and you will probably get 10 different answers of what they really think is going to happen. But what I'd like to do is share with you my favorite economist's view. And this is his view late December. And his opening line in blue says, inflation has come down, has stopped coming down, right? It had been very high, came down somewhat. It stopped and may start to go back up in 2025. But he goes on to say that even though he is award-winning in his ability to do a better job at forecasting inflation than most economists, in red, you see him say, I can't remember being this uncertain about the inflation outlook. At that time, it was President-elect Trump is offering a mix of inflationary, that would be tariffs, individual tax, and disinflationary, that would be deregulation, spending cut policies. So he concludes, businesses and workers need to prepare for multiple inflation scenarios. And that is absolutely key. And it's going to be part of the theme that I will cover as we go through this. So I want to just share with you what is 24 years of the oil price index, this is the Brent oil, versus the industrial chemical price index. And I share this for a couple reasons. One is I want you to see how closely correlated they are, right? So when you hear Trump say, drill, baby, drill, right? And thinking that that will in fact affect in a positive way inflation, it is because there is an absolute correlation through industrial chemicals and they go down the value chain. I'm not showing you metals, but many metals are very energy intensive in their manufacturing, and they see some of that change as well. The other thing that I think you might note as you look at this chart is how much volatility there has been in chemical prices and oil prices over just the last 15 years. So uncertainty has been a part of what we're certainly doing. And I think if you look back here, you can also see that correlation. If you looked at administrations and what has happened in oil prices, chemical prices, were they high? Were they lower, higher? You begin to see some patterns and insights that do tell us that if we get oil prices down, it's likely to lead to lower inventory. Now, I just want to mention that in the last month of the Biden administration, we saw the Brent oil price go up over 10%. We saw natural gas go up over 20%. So we're seeing this volatility. And all this says is we should, in any business condition, be good at scenario planning, but it is imperative during this time. For most of our businesses, you do face some pretty incredible potential business situations that could affect your price as well as many other things. So when I think of scenario planning, I'm thinking of those things that might be uncertain internal kind of things. Do I have budget? Do I have resources? Should I build a new asset? I'm thinking about the normal market dynamics, what's happening with my volume, the demand, the supply versus demand, oil prices, etc. But in today's world, the contextual area is probably the largest uncertainty affecting all others. And that is the political situation, which I've shown in red. That can be things also like government stability, the wars happening in certain regions of the world. So I just highlighted and read a few of the things that maybe are even more unstable that we need to be looking at and assessing within our specific businesses. So 3 questions that I'd like you to think about. Many of these policies might feel like they're a threat to your business. Others are an absolute opportunity in your business relative to price. So the first question, well, what will be the effect of these policies to your cost, to your ability or your pricing power, or your volume and growth, which of course would affect your pricing? And are they going to be negative or positive outcomes for your business? Perhaps number 2 is most important to me today, is will you be proactive with whatever changes hit you? Or what I far too often see is companies that are reactive or act as if they are just a victim to what is coming at them. All right, we'll be talking about that because I want to see you get proactive, get ahead of it. And then lastly, are you positioned today to be nimble, to act quickly and effectively with price changes if in fact you need to, if some of those tariffs hit? And, you know, we've all heard there'd be 25% tariffs on Canada, on Mexico, if they happen. Could be another 10% on China if they happen, right? Meaningful big amounts that we absolutely would have to take care of if they're impacting our businesses. So with those kind of thoughts in mind, I want to go to why proactive is so important. And when I look at this, and I'm going to use a couple client examples as I talk through this. This little chart here, this blue line that shows the kind of up and down, that is really representing, let's say, your pricing power, your pricing favorability, or favorability to raise price over time. And most of us see some volatilities. There's times when it is appropriate and we have the power to raise price. There are other times where we don't have the pricing power. Even holding, maybe dropping, is a more appropriate move. So I would just contend when we hit these inflection points, whether it's just the start of something really good or it's the start of something, ooh, not so good. Those are the biggest points where businesses have the opportunity to really make a lot of money or lose a lot of money. They're critical in changing your strategy and being nimble. So as I take these two clients that I'm going to talk about, I worked with them literally in a day and a half training with their sales and marketing teams each. And we didn't just train, we applied it to their current market conditions. They did a phenomenal job. They were like my A+ students during that 2022, when we all were seeing, for the most part, very high inflation. Many times we had tight markets because we couldn't get supply, couldn't get labor, we couldn't get truck drivers, all allowing us to make some very bold moves. Now, I gave them an A+. Many customers did a terrible job, right? Lost health during that period of time because they were not proactive enough. But let's take these two A students and come roughly 2024, both of them hit a time period where their market demands were dropping and their key raw materials to them were actually dropping. So now their pricing power is a whole lot lower, right? Customers have a lot of choices and they know these two clients have lower cost. In both cases, the actions that they took, one a victim, one not reacting appropriately, overreacting, underreacting, destroyed their business, right? In the first case, it was the victim mentality, and they dropped price far too fast and far too deeply, losing big earnings. The other business held high their prices, did not give anything back when it was appropriate to give some level of price relief. They lost almost 20% of their share. Now, good news, 6 months in, when they saw it wasn't working, they brought me back in. We did another workshop that was really directed at their current dynamics. And we were able to reverse, not fully, but a lot of that damage they had done when the world changed suddenly on them. All right, so I want you to be thinking about what could be coming. I want you to be proactive. And 3 things that I like you to think about that could be threats or opportunities. Number 1, clearly your own situation, but not just your own situation. What about the competitor's situation? It might be easy if they have the same dynamics. If you all say import raw materials from China and they all get hit with tariffs, makes it a little easier because you might all act in similar ways. But if that is different, maybe you're importing and they have local supply, you may be very disadvantaged from a cost price position. And then lastly, what about your customer situation? Will the way they buy, the amount that they buy, affect what you should be doing with your price, as well as other parts of your strategy? So for me, when I'm doing the scenario planning, I like to have cross-functional leaders from most of the functions, because they probably all have things they need to worry about and make changes if you have a different environment. But also good pricing, right? You can enhance your pricing power at times by what some of these other functional groups do, right? Tariffs are coming. Should we build inventory of lower priced lower supplies or lower finished goods cost so that we have some time before we need to move price might be an example. How we change assets and what we might be able to do, where we buy from. Lots of opportunity that can actually help your pricing power. So what I would suggest that you do is think about your situation, competitors, customers, and brainstorm those top big threats and or opportunities that you might face. And I'd say in the short term, those things that could hit you fast. And some of those policies, if they're going to hit you, they may take 6, 9 months into next year. Let's note those and get a little bit even more ahead of those things. And I'll just give you just kind of a couple of examples, right? On the threat side, maybe your cost and the industry, your competitors, all going up, right? And you're going to need to pass on price. The other one I mentioned, your costs go up, but your competitors are buying locally and theirs don't. Harder situation. Here's another situation. You may be importing raw materials and think, oh, we get a tariff coming out of Mexico where I'll just buy locally. But what if your key competitors, one of the large ones, ties up all the local ingredients before you can get to it? Maybe you don't have access. And the last two are around maybe your customers start to switch to different products because of what's happening in your world, or their demand drops because what's happening in their world. Opportunities. If import has been a big competition to you, maybe you're going to see less imports, or those imports that come in at least will be higher price, and therefore, you might have some share uplift possibilities. You might have pockets where customers are actually better positioned through these policy changes, and you can grow with them, provided you have the capacity and you've built the inventory. Certainly, you may, if you do have inventory and costs are going up, that's going to give you some buffer before it's hit, right? Value proposition. This could be an opportunity where whatever value you bring, particularly if you are local sourced, your local manufacturing, that may be a new value prop that is more appreciated in uncertain times. And then, of course, you may have gas prices dropping or oil prices, and following through that, seeing reductions in your own cost, which could put you in a better situation. I'd brainstorm those, and then in very simple ways, do some scenario planning, right? And I know some of you may be more advanced in a scenario planning and do this in a more robust way. But given how quickly you might need to act, we at least need to do some simple scenario planning. And basically, we're going to look at those threats and opportunities and come up with a plausible worst case. What are those big impact, high uncertainty items that might happen? What's our expected case? Might be your current case. What's the plausible, likely best case? Opportunity side where we get some real positives. And as you place those, then we're going to need to ask ourselves, how will our pricing strategy change under each scenario? And of course, as I've already said, it's not just your pricing strategy, your marketing strategy, supply chain, sourcing, inventory, a number of things. Now, if the strategies are pretty much same across the range, you're in pretty good shape. But if they're very different, you're going to need to think about how to be nimble, how to not lock yourself in line in one strategy that you can't get out if you need to pivot. So let me just talk a little bit about pricing flexibility here. One of the things you may be thinking about is what percentage of your business are you want to lock into contracts versus spot market, things that maybe you can move the price almost on a daily basis. For those of you that see some of these policies as threat, you might want more under contract so that you contract with volume commitments so that you don't have a loss during this period of time. And if you see some big opportunities to be able to move price up, might go a little lighter in contracts, a little bit more uncontracted where you can move price in a quicker way. Now, a lot of you have written agreements with your customers already done, already in play. Hopefully you have, or will, to the extent you can, have some clauses that give you some price flexibility. And I'll tell you, at all times, I like price openers in my contracts. And what's a price opener? It's just a clause in there that might be, let's say if it's a 30-day price opener, pretty traditional in a lot of chemicals. Some of them go with 15 days. Equipment might tend to go more the 30 or even 90 days, but it's essentially a clause that says we have the right as the supplier to raise price with 30-day notice, right? And you either accept it, right, negotiate it, or you, customer, are allowed to exit the contract if you're not willing to take on that, if we can't come to an agreement or a negotiation, right? You're not locked in. Does it mean you change the price every 30 days? Absolutely not. You might. More often than not, it is just there for the unexpected that hits you, where it's really appropriate and fair for you to move price. If you have struggled to get that, then go with the price opener, at least with a qualifier. We have that right with 30-day notice if costs go up greater than, let's say, 3%. If this index rises greater than, qualified. You don't have anything, you better have an exit clause. Because if you get hit with costs that are 25% tariffs coming into a key raw material and you can't move it, you could be in a world of hurt. And lastly, as I look at contracts, far too often, I see one-sided contract. The supplier agrees to put all the volume that customer needs. Customer has no commitment to buy back. It's not a balanced risk-reward. Now, should these tariffs hit, and some might hit February 1, who knows? That would be, right, North America, Canada, and Mexico. Probably a tariff surcharge, like a fuel surcharge, would be the quickest action, particularly if we think it might be short-term, right? That's a second line item. We can put that on without heavy negotiation. We can be, this is just a charge we're putting on, right? And as soon as, or if tariffs change, we pull it back. If we know it's long-term or it's more inflation that's going up, of course, we're going to want to use that as an embedded in the actual price. And lastly, make sure you keep an eye on your quotes so that in writing in any quote that you do going forward, you have some verbiage that essentially says price is not guaranteed, right? Or price is only guaranteed for the next 15 days, 30 days. I wouldn't even qualify the days with the rapid changes we're seeing in the administration. And again, quotes, if you're doing a number of items in that quote, different volumes, verbiage on that written quote that says that price is tied to the full scope, full volume. So you choose to buy less, you choose less in volume or less in items, right? We therefore have the right to re-quote a higher price. So those might be pricing moves. Now, I want to give you an example of a business relative to contract situations, because some of you may have contracts that you're thinking, oh, maybe we didn't write them with enough flexibility and we could get caught where we can't move price. And I'm just going to give you kind of a client example that basically my message to you is, don't easily accept that you can't do anything where you have contracts. All right, in this particular situation, this was back in the time period when we had inflation shooting up to 9%. This was a metal-based businesses. They were seeing some metals double in price. And they were actually a culture that was very weak at raising price. They could go years without changing price on their existing customers. So we did a whole consulting thing. We figured it out product by product, and we had one market segment, 17%, another 23 that we were predominantly targeting. And after some training with sales to get them on board, because they were skeptical, they finally said, oh, yes, you know what? It is appropriate. It is fair. We can do this. Oh, but 85% of our volume is locked in contracts and we can't change price at all. My response, of course, was send me those 15 contracts. Let me see them. And really, 10 of them? Absolutely, I said, you can raise price. The contract never said you could raise price, but it did not explicitly say you could not. Therefore, I'm doing it. One actually said, we cannot change price for the next, it was like a 3-year period. Legally, nothing we could do in that particular case. What we did, and what you should consider if you're stuck in that case, is we went back to that customer, a good partner, and we said, look at the situation, this high cost, we need some relief. Will you work with us as a good partner? And they did give us that increase, about half of the amount. And I do find, my experience is, if you get caught in contracts, right, where it's egregious and it is really affecting your profitability, you go back to those key customers, about half of them will understand and will work with you. Will they give you full price? No, but they might split the difference as a good partner because they also want you to be a good supplier for years to come. There was a couple other 4 where 3 were gray zones. In fact, I even had their legal look at it. And legal was basically saying, I don't know. This is gray enough. If they took you to court, I'm not sure who will answer. Well, it's legal's job to put forward the risk. It's our job to say, well, you know what? That risk is pretty low that they would take us to court. It's pretty low that if they did, they would win, not us. And what is the implication if we lost? We gave them some price back. So we moved forward and we were able to get 3 of them full, 1 of them 16 versus the 17% we were after. Again, my bottom line is hopefully you've written your contracts well. If not, look for, and you get caught in a real cost situation, look for some legal challenges, right? Is there anything that allows you to raise price or get out hardship and exit clause before you get caught in a severe cost situation? Is there any volume restriction that if they don't accept it, you can at least keep them to the minimum volume that we both have agreed in the contract? Or if not there, no volume listed, at least keep them to perhaps last year's historical volume and not allow any further volume at that price point. How about product specifics? If they've made some product changes that aren't listed in the contract, well, maybe those new products, those different products, you can raise those. Maybe some of the ones that were named, you can't. And then I always look, yeah, did both parties sign it? Is it really a legal agreement? Or can we rescind it and change policies? All right, let's take this a little further. When I look at volatile times, there are times like 2021, 2022, for most of us 23, where we had a lot of pricing power as suppliers, right? We had fair, appropriate reasons in high inflationary times, in tight markets, to raise price. And my target tends to be to look at my contribution margin, my variable contribution margin, most frequently. I'll look at others, but that's a key thing. And I want to make sure I hold that. I hold my business health. If I had a 40% contribution margin, I'd like to be able to move price, move inflation along to at minimum hold that. And for some to expand it, particularly if your margins have been on the mediocre side, you're not getting return on investment, you don't even have the earnings to really build the next expansion, that I'm going to go a little bit higher and try and improve my health of my business. When things turn down, which might be if you get hit with big tariffs coming at your raw materials. Oh no, excuse me. Let me put it another way. If things turn down such that we have lower cost, maybe oil and gas comes in lower and our costs are lower, things along that line. And it's actually appropriate for you to give some price back, then your key is to do it in a slow way and not to give it all back within the bounds of fairness and appropriateness. So once again, I try and at minimum maintain that healthy contribution margin percent, and I might look to correct it, not give it all back so I end up with a higher margin, particularly, again, if my business has been underperforming or I have literally lost contribution margin percent over the last 3 to 5 years, this is a time to recorrect. Now, when I talked about being proactive, I want to be sure we really understand how quickly you should be acting, right? And how much money you're leaving on the table or potentially losing if you take time to act. And my example here is $1 billion business, and I'm using a contribution margin of 30%. All right, so that's more like a more commoditized, undifferentiated business, typically at that kind of margin. If we had the opportunity to move price 3%, how much earnings is that on a weekly basis? It's about $500,000 every week. So every week you wait in putting that 3% in, that's huge earnings you're leaving on the table. You could be leaving 30% earnings on the table for the year if you don't do it. All right. And with some of these tariff numbers that we're hearing, 3% might be a small amount that you might need to push along. All right, I'm rapidly going through this. But if you're in a position where you're thinking, hey, I think I do need to move price, I like us to think about 3 things. One, we need to have a fair rationale. One we can clearly state, hopefully in writing, to our sales team so that they can talk to a customer why it is in fact and fair that we move price or move a tariff surcharge along. We should be thinking number 2, how are we positioned, right? Are we in a leadership position? Is what we do likely to be pretty visible in our markets? And they are likely to therefore influence others? And should we be one of the first ones out? Usually riskier, but also higher reward where maybe we can move an industry. So if you are one of the larger players, at least one of the top 5, you're at least 5% share. And for sure, if you're that value leader, you are probably positioned to be a good price leader if you have the skill. And then you're that value leader and you're big, it's almost your obligation to lead your industry into a healthier position. And then lastly, I always like to do a price volume trade-off assessment. What is the range of volume or share I might lose if I'm raising price? Or if I opt to actually drop price, which might be appropriate for some of those policies, how much volume or share might I gain, right? And what is the impact to earnings? So I'm making smart decisions and not taking over risk in what I'm doing. Now I'm going to switch this a little to let you know that if you do not do a good job communicating, messaging what's happening in changing times, it almost always ends up in additional price pressure in your market. And it comes from, right? Uncertainty always kind of makes people think the worst could happen. Customers start pushing for price relief. Competitors might start dropping too fast, too soon. and that'll have implications to you. Management might start to scream, all right, we need more volume. We need it now. Your own sales team. I got to help my customers. They're struggling. I got to lower price. So I implore you to get ahead of this uncertainty with your market messaging. And that means first internally, done well, and then externally. And when I say done well, I mean in writing, not just verbally. This is a time where you better have, I think, if you're facing things, talking points, Q&As written out for your customer, for your salespeople, so they know how to answer the questions that will come at them. And then you want to update that, might be monthly or quarterly, who knows at the pace of this administration. But here's the thing, you opt not to do that, your salespeople will still get asked the tough questions. And I guarantee you that a good deal of them will answer those questions with the best intent and the wrong message. So better we arm them so you have a consistent story coming out of your company. And then marketing folks, this is the time to get on some of your external. If you're raising price, it might be public announcements. It might be the customer letters in writing. If your value proposition, you need to really fortify that because there's a threat of people leaving you and you really want to push the value you have or bring out the new value you might gain if you're one of the few locally sourced, locally manufactured suppliers. Might be value prop. It might just be a periodic newsletter, an update of the business, a very short one-pager. Here's what we're seeing in these kinds of policies. And maybe we add a little blip, and by the way, here's what we see in our new products or services. Communication is going to be a key thing. Now, I have said throughout this that while we're working on price in this talk, there are other levers that happen, and you need to certainly work them, but they can also lead to better pricing power for you. What happens with the way that you run assets, inventory planning, those kinds of things are also going to help you or hurt you in price. You might need to drive, from a marketing sales perspective, a different product mix. You might have more threat or more opportunity in one product family than another. Those are things you should be thinking about during this time. And what's the other thing I'd like to see you do? Take and do a 5-minute pulse check of your leading indicators. By leading indicators, I mean those things that will indicate if your world is changing for the positive or the negative. Right? And I've just listed kind of 7 things here as indicators. I usually like to have a little less than 7, but to give you an example, some level of cost or index. If it changes enough, should we change price strategy? Is the supply demand, macroeconomics, political things? You might get explicit on the ones that particularly impact you. Share, inventory, a number of examples. But it's very simple to have a short list, and in your business meeting once a month, put the list up. And is anybody seeing any of these that are maybe favorable to us? Are they the same or unfavorable? And then if it's a change, your 5 minutes just got extended because now you got to think about what we will do with price, as well as the supply chain, inventories, etc. This is something that you should have as a normal part of your business meeting, at least quarterly. In this crazy world, probably monthly. Now, I'm going to conclude with these last few charts that just say, I've covered a lot. I've covered it in a short period of time, but there are some resources from ISBM or through my direct customers, clients that are on the line. And the one area that I would recommend very, very strongly at this time is the day-and-a-half workshop that I traditionally give that is for a business, marketing, and sales full team where we learn strategy and negotiation best practice, but we apply it to the current world. So you come out of it with some pricing strategies, risk assessments, and skill. You're seeing any kind of major thing, I highly recommend we do this. Day and a half inside a business. And by the way, many of you on the line have taken this course with you. In fact, many of my clients take this usually once a year or once a year and a half because your world changes. And now the kind of strategies and alignment and skills are in a whole different place, and we need to adjust. The good news, as Rand mentioned early on, for the first time, I'm going to offer this in an open session to my clients and ISBM members. That announcement's up in the website, but you'll be seeing the actual announcement coming out in the next few days. Full day, 4 hours coming up. And this is really by popular demand. I have many clients that have put their business teams, sales teams through the training, and then they get some new people. People are in different roles, and they want to be able to get those new 5 or something into training. Or maybe you're in a situation where you really are not positioned to be able to bring the full team together, and you need to get at least a few folks up to speed so you can get ahead of the right strategies at this time. This is a one-pager, kind of, if you will, the value prop on this course. I won't go through it. It'll be in the package. You can see to the left the things that you should get out of it. Confidence, courage, and aligned marketing and sales, different strategies, what you're going to do with price, risk assessments, and the kind of profits that people typically get. Because these are actions that you will use the next day to begin to make smarter decisions. Now, additionally, I just want to mention that we also have an offering really in your value pricing. And so for any of you where really quantifying your value, setting the right price, premium, and then putting it into market collateral is going to be particularly important in this environment, maybe as a defensive move, because you might be under threat of losing volume. We do have a course. This is really geared for small teams. It might be for one large product or 4 unique or new products in a business. And once again, it's applied. So it's train and do with some Excel workbook tools so that you can learn, apply it, and then leverage it to other products. May be of interest. There is in there also a better description in the value proposition, what you can expect on the left to get, or excuse me, on the right side, to get out of doing a workshop like this. That'll be for your reading. And with that, with my speed talking, if you will, I think we're a little ahead of the 12 o'clock time. So if there's any questions, I think, Lynn, if you're okay, I'd love to take some.
I would love for you to take some. As always, I really enjoy, and I feel so motivated after I listen to you talk. While we're waiting for people to type into the chat window or raise their hand because they want to open up the mic, I have a question for you about some past times. So there was a time in my past, let's not just say how long it is, but where we had supply
Information, Lynn.
yeah, we had supply kind of dry up for one of our raw materials. And, we had contracts, of course, specified that we would always supply these companies because, of course, they were automotive, and that could shut down a whole run if we didn't supply the volumes that we should. But now we're pressed because we can't get everything. And one of the things we considered was surcharge. You used the word surcharge during your discussion to kind of, it was one of our ways of getting around some contract language. Can you talk to us a little bit about what a surcharge might do for us here?
Yeah, surcharges are ones that often we use for a cost situation, and fuel surcharge is probably the one that most companies are used to, or some level of freight oriented. And they're often because we have some level of uncertainty. Things are hitting us, they're hitting us hard, but they may not be in the mix for the long term, right? They're either coming on suddenly and we add it as a bottom line element,
Mhm.
and then we can remove it, and customers will insist we remove it when that situation changes, which
Right.
often might happen in the case of like fuel surcharges. Now,
Mhm.
when we do fuel surcharges, it is not uncommon for we just put it out and we put out the blast. We've added, this is a situation we're adding these surcharges. And many companies will pay. Other companies, they're not gonna pay their bill, they're gonna pay that wrong, so you're gonna end up potentially with some corrections and invoices and some uh, tough negotiations, but it's the fastest way to move, and then you lose it. If it's
Mhm.
a longer term thing, if you can get it into your price, you will hang on to it in a longer way. It'll just take you perhaps longer uh, to get it into play.
Yeah. We've had a comment that, folks have had customers just short pay that fuel service charge, right?
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
so do you have any ways of heading that off, or you just send that to your collections team afterward?
Well, it's never a good thing, for sure. But the more we communicate, the more our customer service reps are communicating when those orders come in and you're about to put those orders on the books, to be able to say, you recognize this comes with a surcharge and you are accepting the fact that we have added this surcharge. You're going to head off a lot of that. By the way, some companies don't even have the systems that allow them to put that separate line in. So that's yet even another um, potential challenge. But to do it that way, and then to really pre-think, what are you going to do for those companies that absolutely refuse? Do you have legal right? Do you have that wiggle room in the way you have written your contracts? Or are you going to push it? Because there are times where you might elect to stop serving that particular customer. Woo, big move.
Mhm.
If it's a very small surcharge, you're probably not going that way. But if tariffs come in, it's a tariff surcharge, we're talking 25 or 50%, you might need to have a little bit of strength in your negotiate. As Trump uses tariffs to negotiate, you might have to be thinking for those customers that will not comply for very reasonable price moves, that there is some downside. That when that contract comes up, we're going to be shifting some of that product to more of our other customers, our partners, or you're going to be seeing a much bigger, price increase, or we're going to keep you to a minimum volume. You might need to have in your hip pocket little fear factor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can you talk a little bit too about the executive team and how to keep them on board? You've got in our world, we have our customers, which are very large organizations as well. And so sometimes senior leadership reaches out to senior leadership and bypasses the business unit that's trying to do the right thing. Um, how do we make sure that our executive leadership doesn't undermine us?
All right, you're talking within your own company as a
Yes,
supplier,
exactly. Right. Yeah.
right? Because there's also the executives of your customers
That's
um,
right. Right.
as well. And, we say this, it's not uncommon that our top execs talk a good line, but when the first customer calls them, they want you to back off, right? So really making sure they understand the situation, understand the financial implications, because with price, boy, a little movement or a little loss can be huge to earnings. So they all understand what we're looking at and understand the risk reward. Any of these movements, we have a far greater chance of success when we consistently do it. We don't single out the easy customers. We do it across the board, principle based, and we do it when we're talking the same from leaders through a customer service rep to maybe even our truck drivers, right? So that it is clear, it is principled, we're more likely to impact behaviors of others in the market, more likely to have others think that what we're doing is fair, it's trustworthy, it's done with integrity, and therefore it's less of a negative. for you.
Yeah. And then we had one more question. I find keeping the numbers, keeping track of the NBCA is critical, but not done well. Are there practice examples of how to do that well?
Did you just say next best competitive alternative?
Yes,
Yeah.
that was my question. That's what I
It
meant.
wasn't sure if you said MBA or
No,
Yeah.
NBCA.
yeah.
Mhm.
So what is the next best competitive alternative? Yeah, I suspect Paul or others on the line may have a better way of even answering that. But most of the businesses I work with, they're pretty clear on where their key alternatives are. It's just that in this world, your key alternatives may be a very different product, right? So we just have to kind of recognize and open our thinking that if our product is disadvantaged, we're maybe selling this polymer, maybe they can move to this type of metal that is less disadvantaged. That could happen. So we're just, most of them, if they recognize to ask themselves the question, I think are going to be fairly good at understanding that. And then many companies also have some import export access to those kinds of figures so they can see if there are some changes happening. And in our case, probably it would be less imports, which might offer you, if you have the inventory, the capacity, the ability to pick up some share in this time. Having said that, any of our other experts online have a twist they'd like to throw out on that question?
Well, I found working in the value proposition workshop, everyone is focused on their costs. And you're really building the idea that what is your differential value? Because a lot of what we've talked about is changing rapidly, but it's hitting everybody. So the next best competitive alternative is typically being hit with some of these incredible VUCA-like things as well. So how are you different? How are you really, have you, and I've just found that really differentiating from the next best competitive alternative and understanding what's changing there has been kind of a weak spot when we're trying to build a good, strong value proposition. Do you really understand, as you say, is the alternative something else? Is the alternative in the same boat you are? Is everyone's tide going up, everyone hit with the flood? So,
Ralph, I just want to really reiterate, your competitors might not be in the same position. We all have different manufacturing footprints and different sourcing. And if they are in different regions of the world, different oil-based prices, there can be that disparity that might help you or hurt you. And you'll need to button it up or take advantage.
thanks, Joanne.
Awesome.
All right. I think
All
we
right,
have.
we're going to give everybody one last shot because, okay, so there's a note that says, well, we should probably talk about VUCA, which we are actually going to do next because we've had a little confusion about our other folks from Fragment. So they're going to show up an hour later, but Paul's here. But before we let you go, because Joanne, if anybody's sitting on an action that they want to ask a question, here she is. So I'll give everybody one more shot at it if you need that help. Otherwise, you know where to reach her. She's left you her email address and her phone number, and she'll be happy to take your call.
And Lynn, let me just reiterate there. If you need, 15 minutes, you need a quick conversation because you have a situation or you want to test a strategy. If you're an ISBM member, you're one of my clients, call me. You've got that contact information. We'll go through it.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanne. So really appreciate this very much. I feel maybe a little better. It would be nice to know what's going to hit us, but we might be ready at least for it. So that's good. Yeah. Thank you.